Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group, with Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, snowy week in March, Curtis. Mid-March, snow's landed.
Yeah, I do feel for those dealers who are clearing snow off windscreens on car forecourts, especially with the March plate change. They don't need this, do they?
You just don't need it, do you?
No.
And my choice of vehicle is still not very good in this weather. So I did think that I'd got through the worst of it, and I'll change vehicles before I get to the next winter.
Yeah.
And it's caught me out again.
Are we talking rear-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive?
I'm talking rear-wheel drive, white BMW Touring. With low profiles. It couldn't really get any worse for this kind of weather. But yeah, that's my choice. But unfortunately, as I said last week, Curtis, my Sarah did get her new Cougar plug-in hybrid. It's very nice.
Yep.
I think it's bigger than what she may have expected, if I'm honest.
Have you been for a ride in it yet?
As a passenger, yes. I weren't allowed to drive it yet.
That's interesting. Not allowed to.
I am allowed to. She just chose not to let me initially.
That's understandable. It's a new
car. I don't know
car.
about that. I could do with it tomorrow because it has got a snow mode on it, which I could really do with this week. But it's very nice. So yeah, nice thing. Self-charging and plug-in. So when she's sat nicely on the M62 trying to get to work, stop starting, it really does charge the battery up ready for when she can drive with it on EV. She can set off from here with 17 miles on, and by the time she gets to work, it has 45 miles on the EV charge because of stop starting whilst it's in petrol mode. But yeah, I did say I'd update on that one, Curtis.
Yeah, I suspect there's going to be a battle for the keys. Whoever's out first in the morning will be heading for those keys.
I will lose that one. So this week we've had the winner of the Barbara Cox Woman of the Year award that we did mention previously on the podcast, and a fantastic award that is for the winner of that. And that was announced this week.
Yes, so highly commended were Kate Rubery-Schumack, Head of People and Communication at Rigel Commercials. Erin Baker, Editorial Director at Autotrader, was also highly commended, but the overall winner was Sarah Slowman, who is Chief Strategy Officer at Paythrough, and she's also Director of the EV Cafe. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with Sarah on the various EV forums over the last couple of years, and she is such a good winner. I mean, she's such a good ambassador for all things electric, and certainly through the EV Cafe, they've created this online EV community, and it was launched right at the beginning of the COVID lockdowns and really gained momentum, and they do a lot of work on YouTube and LinkedIn. So congratulations to Sarah on a well-deserved win there.
Exactly, and congratulations to everybody that were nominated and shortlisted for the award. It's a great effort just to get even nominated in terms of being recommended by your friends and colleagues within the automotive sector, and then to be shortlisted, and then obviously to win as well. So fantastic, and well done to everybody involved there.
And just as a reminder, we've recorded a couple of interviews recently, so do check those out. So we spoke to Darren Martin about February's used car values. John Hanlon at Wayland's Automotive, we caught up with him just a couple of weeks ago. And last month, Virtue's CEO, Robert Forrester. So all those interviews are still available as standalone episodes on your podcast feed.
Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group.
So headlines this week are from Motor Trader, Motor Trade News, Car Dealer and AM Online. So we'll start in a minute with new car registrations jump 26% in February as the taps reopen on new car supply. LCV registrations enjoy their best February since 1998. Online searches for used cars hit new high for February, but supply shortages and economic pressure dampens lead volumes, reports eBay Motors Group. Staying with February, the Nissan Leaf defies the slump in EV values to deliver the best used car margin. And we reveal which car brands buyers will travel the furthest to visit a showroom. And we'll finish off with a couple of stories touching on the sort of car supermarket world, with Big Motoring World opening its sixth site. And a familiar name in the car supermarket world is appointed CEO of Cazoo.
Yeah, fantastic update there. So, as we said there, we'll be heading over to AM Online first, and the new car figures for the month of February have been released this week alongside the ones for LCV. But we'll go to the cars first, and as Curtis said there, February's we're on AM Online here. So February's 26.2% registrations growth shows taps are reopening on new car supply. So the month finished on 74,441. As I say, that was a jump of 26.2% year on year. So, I think it kind of shows that there is a return of supply now entering the market. There's an appetite from OEMs now in terms of some other sales channels that they may not have previously operated in when supply was very short. So, there is a feeling that some of these vehicles are now starting to enter some of them fleet and contract hire sectors.
Yeah, definitely welcome news. And I think you're right, because fleet in particular has done particularly well in February. So it accounted for 46%. No, sorry, it accounted for 59% of all registrations. And that was a year-on-year uplift of 46%. So if we're talking about those taps opening up on supply, I think we can now see where they're going, because as we've talked about on previous episodes, a lot of the new car supply was being targeted towards the retail sector where better margins were available. But I think what we're seeing now is an opening up into that bigger fleet sector, so end user fleets as well as leasing company fleets.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, market share last year was 47.1% for private, with a 50.7% for fleet in the month of February. And as Curtis said there, that's jumped to 58.8% for fleet and down to 39.5% for private registrations. And that takes the year to date, including January, for private at 43.1%. So that's down from 51.8% last year, and takes fleet up for the year to date from 46.4% to 54.9%. So it does give that clear indication that maybe that the order banks now are starting to ease off a little bit for those private registrations that have been on longer lead times and being sort of backfilled. And actually, we're just starting to see this re-entrance into some of that leasing, much needed fleet market that does generate the used 3 and 4 year old vehicles that are desperate for the used car market at the minute.
Yeah, and the strength of the market can be seen in those overall figures that you mentioned. So 74,440 registrations, and that's down just 6.5% on pre-COVID February 2020, which was actually the last normal month, wasn't it?
Yes.
So it's just 6.5% down on that. And February marked the 7th consecutive month-on-month growth, and some interesting trends around fuel types, because petrol in February accounted for 43% of total volumes, diesel down to just 4.5%, battery electric vehicles 16.5%, and hybrids 13%. but plug-in hybrids 6%. And if you start looking at the year to date, so taking those first 2 months of the year, hybrids up 40%, which actually makes hybrids, not plug-in hybrids, just normal hybrids, it makes them the fastest growing fuel sector, accounting for 14% market share.
Yeah, and there has been a lot of chatter in the sector about that. The rumours and reports that some of the early adopters of plug-in battery electric vehicles, so your BEVs, have started to come away a little bit because of the charging issues, because of the cost of electric at the minute, and that sort of added challenge of and range anxiety that still exists in some parts, not necessarily to do with the distance that the vehicles can go on a full charge. It's more about being able to charge when they get to their destination. That there seems to be sort of that hybrid seems to be getting a bit of resurgence now, that being that alternative, that you've got that benefit of an electric vehicle, but you'll always get to your end destination without that challenge of having to get to a charging point. But again, we know that fully battery electric vehicles is on the horizon. It's coming very, very quickly.
It does leave car manufacturers with a bit of a dilemma, though, doesn't it? Because if hybrids are growing in terms of market share and demand, meanwhile, the OEMs are trying to dial down on hybrid production as they focus more on pure battery electrics and plug-ins. So it's going to be fascinating
It
to see
does.
how this one pans out over the coming months.
It does.
But you've got some European figures as well, haven't you?
I have, yeah. As always, I've got a few European figures. So if you start off looking at France, we're up 9.4% to 126,200. Germany still a little bit soft, but still a significant volume, up 2.8% to 206,200. You've got Italy up 17.5%, so a great result there in Italy, up to 130,400 there, and Spain up 19.2% to 74,000 there. So some significant performance there for some of our European partners, but a lot going on in the used car market abroad there. So they're a bit sort of split in terms of the European market. Germany and Italy are both recording an increase in volume sales index, up 9.1 and 15.3%. Whereas the sales volumes for Spain and France are split again. I mean, Spain up 5.5%, but France 48.2%, as France has seen a growth in sales volume for used vehicles over there. So yeah, some changes over there in Europe for used car performance as well.
And heading over to Car Dealer, the headline there is LCV market enjoys best February for 25 years after second month of growth in a row. So, encouraging news here on in terms of LCV sales. So the market was up 8.5% for the month to just over 17,500 units. So that's the second month-on-month growth and the best February since 1998. And some interesting observations on the areas that did well over the course of the month. So there was a rise in demand for large vans, those sitting in the 2.5 to 3.5 ton category. They were up by 14%, while small vans up to 2 tons, they were up 5.2%. But the medium-sized vans, the vans that sit in between the 2 tons and 2.5 tons, actually fell by 16.5%. So I don't know if that reflects a broader long-term trend towards those larger units.
Could well be. Also this week are the production figures for the month of January, and again, you've got used car production, new car production in the UK fairly level, so down 0.3% year on year at 68,575. But LCV production for the month of January is performing really well. You've got the 35.6% up, Curtis, up to 9,299 LC commercial vehicles were manufactured in the UK. But obviously, on average, 80% of these vehicles do go for export out of the UK market.
Yeah. And heading over to Motor Trader for the next headline, which is average used stock sees second consecutive monthly drop. So this is staying with looking at trends for February, and it's based on eBay Motor Group's latest market view analysis. So February's used car market, according to eBay Motor Group's research, was shaped by the ongoing shortage of dealer stock and continued price stability, although higher than usual levels of online buyer activity was dampened by a softening of conversion leads over the course of the month. So if we start by looking at those stock volumes, so average stock volumes dropped for the second month in a row from 55 to 51 cars, and that's actually the lowest level since October last year. And within that, car supermarket inventories were actually hit the hardest, with volumes down 16% to 336 units, and that equates to a month-on-month shortfall of 62 units. That was followed by franchise dealers down 11% from 85 to 76 units, while independent sites actually remained unchanged at 33 units.
Yeah, the average vehicle price of those vehicles averaged 19,152. Marginal drop month on month by 0.6%, but a year on year increase of 4.4%, and basically very sort of level really across all of the markets there. So car supermarkets saw a marginal increase of 0.6%, similar for franchise dealers at 0.8%. And independents saw a 0.3% change as well. So, very marginal right across the board there. So showing that there's still a bit of stability there in terms of pricing within the sector.
Yeah, and eBay Motors Group actually point out that in terms of the number of views they were seeing across their platforms in January and February, they're actually at a 4-year high. But as Lucy Tugby says in this story, the lack of supply is actually being compounded by the economic pressures facing consumers, resulting in a softening of conversion to lead time. So this is the ongoing dilemma of shortage of cars out there to sell, and buyer confidence. Do buyers purchase now? Do they wait to see what happens in terms of will prices come down, whilst also factoring in the rising cost of living?
And adding to your point earlier in terms of fuel types, they do comment that petrol remains the most popular fuel choice, accounting for 49% of all listings, followed by diesel at 40%. But then we start talking about, to your point earlier, Curtis, around EV and hybrid. EVs accounted for 5% of all dealers' listings, and that was up from 1% in February of last year. But hybrids more than doubled their year-on-year share from 3% to 7% this year. So kind of indicating there, Curtis, that there is still that sort of favouritism towards hybrids over the fully battery electric vehicles at the minute.
We're going to have to keep an eye on hybrids, aren't we?
But we do need to encourage the market to get involved with battery electric vehicles, because they are coming, and we need to get the used market and the consumers confident on stocking and investing in used battery electric vehicles. But there's again, as always, we do say within the podcast when we're covering the eBay Motors update that there's a lot of detail in the report, and we'd always encourage you to head over to the website and check the latest market view there, because they do go into detail in terms of which makes, models, fuel types are in high demand, even down to age profiles and model profiles in terms of sectors as well. So there's a lot of detail in there, worth heading over and checking that out if you haven't done already.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed.
So talking about EVs. This week, Dealer Auction have published their top 10 by models by retail margin for the month of February. And this is covered in AM Online. Nissan Leaf defies slump in used EV values to deliver car market's top margin. And that's sort of not the Land Rover Range Rover product off the top spot, which has been dominated there with the Discovery Sport for a while there in number one position. And the Nissan Leaf is reported to have a 3,750 average margin between what the vehicles were sold for and subsequently advertised for after they were purchased. But you don't know. I'm not quite sure how long that will last for. I mean, there has been some cheapness and leaves entering the market, and maybe it is a case of a bit of a trade to retail lag at the minute. But you don't know with EVs at the minute because, as Darren said, didn't he, Curtis, that it's not all EVs that
Yeah.
have been been under pressure. Some are still in reasonable demand, where depending on where their price point is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's interesting that within this listing there is a top 10 on the AM website. The Nissan Leaf is actually the only EV car, isn't it?
Yes.
In a top 10 made up of 4x4s, estates, SUVs. It's a real cross section, but it's the only EV.
Yeah, you're right. It tops there behind ahead of the Discovery Sport, Mitsubishi Outlander X3, XC90, the Evoque, the CX5, the Mercedes C-Class, followed by E-Class, and in 10th place there you've got the Jaguar XF. So again, always interesting to see what's happening out there in the market, what the average retail price is, retail margin is at the minute, which it has been falling marginally over the months as we've entered the new year there. So your average retail margin across all makes, all models, away from the top 10 is on average 1,763 now. And that was topping 2,000s for the majority of last year overall average. So slight easing off now in terms of that average margin across the market.
Heading over to Motor Trade News for the next headline, which is Mercedes customers go the extra mile to visit showrooms. So this is a piece of research that's been conducted by JudgeService for its latest white paper, which is actually published this week. And we'll have a link to that on the newsletter that goes out Monday morning. But interesting piece of research is because they found that Mercedes-Benz customers travel further to showrooms than any other car buyers as consumers increasingly look to buy locally. So looking at those local purchases before we look at the brands, when it comes to purchasing a car last year, most buyers, so 44%, only travelled up to 5 miles to visit a franchise dealership, while over a quarter, 28%, were prepared to travel between 5 and 15 miles. However, buyers prepared to travel over 30 miles fell year on year from 21% to 16.5%. So what we're seeing here is a reduction in the sort of average mileages that buyers are prepared to travel to visit a showroom to go and choose their next car.
Yeah, and you do wonder how much of that is, the retailers doing a better job, impact from COVID in terms of people wanting to drive further or not and shorten the distance travel. But again, when you start digging into the brands, you can see where some of that choice of vehicles and type of vehicles do play into some of the results there, don't they, Curtis?
Yeah, definitely. So, as we said, Mercedes-Benz was the top of the list for in terms of how far customers are prepared to travel. So that averaged out at 48 miles. Number two was Subaru at 38 miles. And third place was Jaguar at 36 miles. And the top 10 is pretty much made up of premium brands and sort of specialist niche brands. So again, sort of reaffirming why customers would travel slightly further than they would normally to go and search out these vehicles.
Yeah, and they do say that the research found that distance customers score dealers 13% lower than local customers as well. So suggesting there that that someone has made a journey it is important simply things that well by making sure that the vehicle they're interested in is ready to view, salesperson is available, and refreshments are offered. And I suppose there's a case that actually if somebody has gone all the way to travel a reasonable distance, then if they don't get the service that they're expecting when they get there, then predominantly they may give that bad feedback. But I don't know if you want to go through the top 10, Curtis. We know you like a top 10.
Okay, at number 10 is Volkswagen at 25 miles, Honda at 26 miles, Isuzu at 30 miles, joint number 6, Land Rover, 34 miles, BMW at 34 miles as well, joint number 4, Volvo, 35 miles, also Lexus at 35 miles, and that top 3 again, Jaguar, 36 miles, number 2, Subaru at 38 miles, and top of the pile, Mercedes-Benz at 48 miles.
So heading over to a bit of a couple of updates here from what Curtis mentioned earlier in terms of the supermarkets. So the first one is with Car Dealer, and this is Big Motoring World. Pete Waddell's Big Motoring World set to open its 6th used car supermarket. He's going from strength to strength, isn't he, Pete Waddell, Curtis? He's really going for it. But you did notice a little bit of an update on social media this week about his helicopter in for a paint job, or new helicopter in for a paint job.
Yeah, there was a photograph on LinkedIn. I think he's about to take delivery, and it just needs the paint job to be completed. But before that happens, this site has actually opened. It's a former Mannheim auction centre, as you say, in Wimbledon. So this brings the headcount up to 6 sites. And Big Motoring World, a huge success story down my end of the country in the southeast. So it launched in Bluebell Hill, which is near Chatham. It has centres in Westmoreland and Enfield. And late 2021, I think it was, it acquired 2 sites in Peterborough. So with the opening of this site, it makes it up to 6. And the expectation is that the new site will sell at least 1,000 units a month. And this is very much the first strategic move from Big Motoring World after the closure of Cazoo, which was its dedicated online business, which went into voluntary receivership in June 2022.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, he's looking at opening this fairly quickly. So I think they're looking for an opening in June of this year. So very swiftly getting in there and getting it fully operational, ready to go. I guess this isn't going to be the last we see from a growth plan from Pete. I think he's looking at bigger aspirations. They've just launched their car buying service called BigWantsYourCar.com. That is showcased and expanded across the fleet collection vans on his social media feed. So yeah, he's very much out there. He's expanding. He's got some significant growth plans in place, and he's what did he say? Go big or go home. Is his iconic saying there. So, and he's certainly doing that. So he's out there. He's looking at expansion, and a great move there for Pete in terms of that operational growth, and to turn that around, get it operational by June is fantastic as well. So you can start to see the benefits this year from that purchase.
Yeah, exactly. And final story this week comes from AM Online, and it's Cazoo appoints former car shop CEO Jonathan Dunkley as COO. So yes, staying in the sort of car supermarket world, and this is the announcement that Jonathan Dunkley has been appointed as Chief Operating Officer. Now, Jonathan Dunkley will be familiar to listeners from his time leading the car shop car supermarket chain, which was bought out by Sytner Group, and he did actually go with the business and was sat on the executive board at Sytner all the time that Car Shop was bedding in as part of its the sort of broader franchise business. So it's a good move, and Jonathan had been working in an advisory role at Cazoo over the last 18 months, and hopefully this is going to bring some stability to Cazoo, because obviously over recent months it's been in the headlines, but pretty much for all the wrong reasons.
No, you're right, and there's still a lot going on. There's quite a few stories this week that are connected with Cazoo, with what's going on there. Jonathan is a great operator. Fantastic job that he did with Car Shop before the acquisition by Sittners. And he brings a wealth of knowledge and into the Cazoo operation that many may say was needed right from the start. But they've got Jonathan in there. They've got him initially, as you say, Curtis, as a more strategic advisory role. Now appoint him as COO. He can really start to sort of get involved and make some changes within the business. And Alex is quoted in the piece here that he's quite pleased with the performance so far in 2023 by the business, and that the swift and decisive management action to progress with restructuring of the group. So they're trying to make some significant moves here, significant restructuring, and fairly early on in this year to sort of try and get the benefit from it. So, we'll sort of obviously see a lot more probably coming out from this as Jonathan gets under the bonnet there, so to say, and starts to put some of his ideas that he learned, he did very well with at Car Shop into play, and we'll obviously see what does happen from there. But a great move from Cazoo eventually to get him in a more significant operational role.
Yeah, and interesting comment from Alex Chesterman, founder of Cazoo, who says we remain on track to achieve our goal of reaching profitability without the need to raise further external funding until the second half of 2024. And we continue to expect to end 2023 with over £100 million of cash and cash equivalents on our balance sheet, and to sell between 40,000 to 50,000 UK retail units in the current year. So still pretty bold targets there for Cazoo.
Yeah, and I'm sure many listeners to the podcast this morning will be having many views on whether that's achievable, realistic, and what will happen. But it certainly gives us plenty of headlines to talk about on a regular basis, Curtis, if nothing else.
It does indeed, yeah. We could almost have a regular Cazoo corner, couldn't we?
Yes, but that's it for this week. Hopefully you're staying safe in the odd sort of spatters of snow that we've been getting this week. And again, great win there for the Barbara Cox Award with Sarah. We will try and get Sarah onto the podcast 1 week just to talk us through what it means for her and what she's planning on doing, because I did have the pleasure of watching the event, and she shared what she wants to do with the winnings, the money that you get from winning the award there, and talk through what she does and in general and her ambition in things. So hopefully she is listening to the podcast and open offer, and I'm sure you know us both well enough that you can reach out to us if you want to. But that's it for this week, so please do stay well in this adverse weather conditions that we seem to be having at the minute.
That's all for now. Many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
You've been listening to Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group. We'll be sharing all the links from this week's headlines on Monday morning. So to make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.